Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I'm honored to have a special guest on. Now, this guest comes all the way from Ireland, and the reason why I'm excited about this guest is because he's much further in the journey of podcasting as well as adding value in the area of finance and accounting, and it is Andrew Codd, the host of Strength in Numbers, and he is also in the practice of actually he's not a person who just talks about finance and accounting. He actually does it as well. So, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, my pleasure, Terrell. I'm really excited to be here with you and your audience.
Absolutely. Now, before we talk about your podcast and your business, tell us a little bit about your background before you started those.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Terrell. I suppose, look, a number of years ago, I fell in love with finance and accounting and was fairly strong with numbers. And I didn't think I'd make much money as a fighter pilot or as a maths teacher. So I decided on a safe career in accounting, and one thing led to another. I worked my way up in various companies in and around London and England. And I ended up in private equity and as a consultant. And I just felt that as finance professionals, what I learned as an accountant to be able to balance the books and do reconciliations and deconstruct a business, while it's great skills, uh, they needed to be put into a different context to be able to be more influential and have more meaningful careers in finance and accounting. So that's why I felt like I needed to share with others what was working, what could work better in finance and accounting. And, I wouldn't have got anywhere near where I would have got to without mentors. So that's when I embarked on doing the podcast to share the stories of other people who were finding success in finance and accounting. And rather selfishly, I was learning off them, but also sharing their stories with thousands and thousands of other people.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, when you mentioned about going into private equity, I mean, if you think back on it, would private equity have been the route you would go, or would you have chosen another route to kind of start your career in accounting and finance?
Yeah, I suppose looking at it, it's something I wanted to get into when I was out of college. And I found on my summers it was really easy to make money as a temp in accounting. It's just like you sit at a computer all day and you have what we say in Ireland, the crack, a good laugh and fun in the office. Not crack as in the drug, but you know, we wouldn't get any work done then. But we'd have good fun around the office. So it was a really great environment. And so I was a bit delayed getting into private equity, but I'm sort of glad I didn't jump straight in, because I have to say the pace in there is unreal. They work you hard, but you get compensated very, very well. And at that time, I suppose I was starting a family and I was missing, them growing up, which has sort of allowed me to, how do you say, come to the decision to set up my own consulting firm at the time, because I felt I'd get a bit more control back over my time. And that worked out very well. And I used to commute between Ireland and the UK for many, many years. And I found it was a good eye opener, because it's important you try things, because you have a certain expectation about how they might be, and they could be like all nice and rosy and whatever, but it's really, really hard work. And as much as I work hard, there's people out there who are much better working harder than me.
Gotcha. Now that's one of those things that become very interesting for a lot of people where they're like, they want to make that decision of, starting their own practice or starting their own firm because they want to dedicate more time to their family, or they want to balance more things out, or whatever the reason is. But a lot of people run into fear about that. Like, what do you think it was for you to kind of help you like get past that to make that decision?
Um, I think two things really. One is having a really good group of solid people around you that you can knock advice against, and will not give you any BS back. They will shoot straight back at you. And I think there's an expression: your vibe is your tribe. So just if you want to get a good vibe, or that vibe that you feel is relevant to you, is to surround yourself with good people like that. So again, I wouldn't be anywhere where I am at the moment without that vibe. And it works both ways. If you're in a sort of a negative tribe, it might be holding you back. And I think that's where self-awareness comes in. I think also another thing is having a very strong partner, or in my case, the boss at home. She's got very high standards, so she doesn't allow any shortcuts or anything, and but also great encouragement to get over the fear, because that's a big thing for not just finance professionals, but any professional or anyone embarking as an entrepreneur, growing a business. It's getting out of that comfort zone. And it's a bit like a muscle, I guess. You know, you put it on a bit of strain, and an appropriate amount of strain in a good environment is going to grow, and you're going to see some results.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then speaking of getting out of the comfort zone, now a podcast as successful as yours is not something that you see a ton of accounting and finance professionals go into. I mean, usually that's not the typical path for us. So,
Yeah.
how many episodes are you in on your podcast?
Well, we're just coming up to episode 300, and again, I, I, I suppose, like, as much as I might be a bit of a figurehead behind it, we've a tremendous group of guest mentors behind that. You know, we've people coming on every week sharing their stories, and just like your show, Terrell, it's all about sharing and providing paths to other people to help them get out of their comfort zone, to make it a bit less fearful, a bit more safe, help people see over the fence and what's happening. But for me, I think anyone that gets past 10 podcasts, I remember reading statistics on it. I think something like 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 8. So if you can record 10 podcasts and get them up there, you're already in the top 20% of podcasts of all time. So, so you know, and then from there, it's just a case of turning up each and every week with the team around you, and keep turning out great content and interacting with the audience, and giving them something of value.
Gotcha. Now, what has that journey been like, or what has some of the episodes been about that you've really said, hey, that had an impact with the audience?
Yeah, you know what initially caught a lot of people's imagination, Trell, was something called business partnering. And I don't know if that makes sense as an expression to entrepreneurs, or particularly folks based in the United States, because when you think of business partners, you're probably thinking of investors or people who are actively taking a stake in my business. But this concept developed in finance back in the 1960s, so it's not a new term. It was coined by a guy called Stanley Harding. He was a controller of BP, British Petroleum. They didn't do so well over in the States after the oil refinery disaster. So, but you know, they had some good finance people, and what he was essentially saying is that accountants, finance professionals, or in fact any support professional, needs to be out there working with their business, partnering with them on a day-to-day basis, walking the journey with them, not necessarily taking a financial stake in their business, but actually walking the path with them. And we had some very great guests, and I think that's what helped accelerate the popularity of Strength in the Numbers of the show, was because we had people interested enough to find out more about this business partnering, how to make it happen, because there's not the type of thing you see in textbooks. In fact, when I wrote my first book on the subject, Terrell, I think there was only one other book on the market at the time. Now there's a few more. So some I've edited, some I've written myself, but there's no real textbook on it. And I think that's a lot of the things, like, you know, that what I love about your show is that you're sharing real practical advice, you know, stuff that works, stuff that doesn't work, because people have gone through it, and it might work in a different context, but at least it's nice having that knowledge. So I think that's the power of the podcast, and it gives you that stuff that's not necessarily in a textbook, and it's real people talking about real things that happen. And I think that's where the initial success came from, is business partnering. And then we went into other topics. So how people manage with a global relocation, or stepped up to various different levels or different sectors. At the moment, I'm trying to get the CFO of the United Nations on, because, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and getting curious to know how they deal with those challenges and what they can share with their audience. And by the way, the favorite section that our audience have is that, what's the best bit of advice you've ever received? Seriously, that is the best one. Geez, I just put most of that into a book, and it sold pretty well. So I think people like hearing that type of advice.
Awesome, awesome. So where can people find the book you mentioned? So where can they find your books? Where can they get a copy? And then next I want to talk about, your speaking engagements and different things like that.
Yeah, sure. So look, the books, they're published via Kindle and I think CreateSpace. So in effect, they're generally available on Amazon. So you can either check out the author name, Andrew Codd, CODD, or you can type in the Audacious Finance Partner, and it tends to list all the books I've edited or written myself. So you'll find it that way. And again, I was very lucky. I think I just caught on the topic at the right time, and that Audacious Finance Partner became a bestseller in 4 countries within finance and management accounting. So again, a lot of people I've found good use in that book. And again, the message in that book is just, take what from you can, make uniquely your own, what's there that you feel like aligns with your strengths, and share it with others.
Awesome.
We can add so much value and out there if we just think about things in the right way.
Awesome. Now, I know we talked before about, speaking engagements and how that has panned out. So what have been some of the speaking engagements and the kind of the topics you've spoken on?
Yeah, it's an interesting environment we're in, because I used to love those sort of face-to-face engagements where you turn up to a conference for a few days and you get to meet some old friends and make some new ones. I love the social aspect of it, particularly the after party. I don't want to make people sound like I'm an alcoholic or anything, but it's nice to socialize over a few drinks and food. Who doesn't love food? So yeah, so I do miss that aspect. So a lot of it's more virtual nowadays, and I suppose early days was really sharing what I learned on my journey in finance and business partnering, and as a leader, I guess helping teams reach their potential. More later times, I've actually sort of embarked on what's known about 2 areas. One is separating our roles and identities. If you go to a business party or a barbecue, and someone asks you that question, what do you do for a living? You say, oh, I'm an accountant. It's like, there's so many stereotypes. You know what's real? I typed into Google, right? Hashtag boring accountant. And it came up with like 10 million responses in like
Oh, wow.
0.3 seconds, right? I typed in boring astronaut because for me, being stuck in an aluminium tube in space is pretty boring, right? Only about 4 million results. Okay, so like, what's the problem with accountants? Why is it so boring? But it's not. I mean, you get to influence, decisions that have a financial impact, and not only that, they provide, sustainable employment opportunities for people, new product launches, making sure that the companies can survive. It's stable. It's around for the future. Again, if we brought our full tool sets to bear within the business and become a bit more influential, we could actually drive much more sustainable business. And I think in more modern days, we've got the climate change agenda as well, is make sure the right non-financial decisions are being taken, not just for the benefit of ourselves, but the future generations to come as well. So we have very, very important roles to play if we choose to step up to the plate. And I think that's where a lot of my discussions are around nowadays. And I do that using something called the value ladder, which is essentially saying for thousands and thousands of years, we've been sort of the lower levels of that value ladder. And it spells the word crafted. So collecting data, reporting data, analyzing it, and following it. So like current real-time type reporting. But where a lot of our businesses want us to be operating at, and that's whether you're in practice or whether you're supporting an entrepreneur or even in a startup or more mature business, is translating all that information into implications, what might happen, evolving, options of what can be done using our training and looking forward and being a bit more prescriptive, and then working with the business to join the dots and then deploy those solutions with the business, with the enterprise, with the organizations for successful, sustainable outcomes. And that's quite a meaningful career, I think, for most people.
No, I think that is an amazing career. So where can people find you online or on social media if they want to listen to the show or just follow to see what you're up to next?
Yeah, so hashtag SITN will find your way to the show. It's one of those things. It's like someone said, you are who Google says you are. So I said, look, early days, get as much exposure to Google, do all those different platforms that Google likes. And so, yeah, so hashtag SITN and you'll find the show. If you do want to connect with me personally, you can find more information about linkedin.com, or you can reach out to me at andrew@sitnshow.com. I have an assistant who tends to filter my emails, so just say that you heard us on Terrell's show, and we'll make sure we have a chat or conversation. I'll get back to you.
Awesome, awesome. Well, before we wrap up, one question that I always like to ask all the guests, and I mean, you do something very similar on your show is, when you think about, your journey and your expertise, what's two pieces of advice that you would share with other business owners?
Yeah. For, first one is, um, like nothing ever happens as fast as you'd like it to. It's like because setting up a podcast, my own business, or even in the world of actually corporates, if you try and do something big and audacious, right? And it makes sense, yeah, it makes sense or whatever, and it should work, but it just tends to take a bit longer. We don't know what we don't know, right? So that's true. We're all ignorant of our own ignorance. So that's one thing I'd sort of suggest is patience, and that's something I've developed over the years. It depends on who you say or ask that question to. I could be a bit more patient still, probably, but it takes a bit of patience and persistence. And I suppose then the other one is in whatever you're doing, try and do something that I'm not saying follow your passion per se, right? Although that makes it easier doing things that you like, but you tend to do things that you like that you tend to be good at, and things that others are willing to pay for and value. So try and always think about, from the other person's perspective, what value am I adding? And a great thing in finance, Terrell, as is we tend to quantify the impact of what we do in decisions. So we tend to have a bit of a head start in getting ahead of it, where we're probably behind other professions is in messaging and influencing and dressing up those messages and marketing ourselves in the right way. But definitely figure out what the value prop is and how to communicate it and follow that through. And if you do something that other people value, then that's meaningful work. And particularly if it plays to your strengths and it's what you enjoy, that is the way to live the dream, as we say here in West Cork, Ireland.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your story, sharing your background and your pieces of wisdom. We'll definitely include some links so people that are watching and listening can find you online and check out your podcast and your book and all the stuff that you're up to. So thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Terrell, it's my pleasure. And by the way, keep up the great work. Really love what you're doing with the show. And can't wait for the next one.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.